Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Donald Trump's showdown with the judiciary in the spotlight as a US judge orders Trump officials to testify about efforts to return a wrongly deported man to El Salvador, says no evidence that government tried to secure his return. Amid escalating trade tensions, Trump says ball is in China's court. Beijing warns US tariffs putting pressure on economy, trade. White House seeks Harvard's apology, even as US escalates action against the educational institution, threatens to strip its tax-exempt status if it doesn't submit to wide-ranging government oversight. Humanitarian crisis deepens as Sudan's civil war enters third year. Paramilitary RSF and army declare rival governments. G7 calls for immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Sudan. And India slams Pakistan's remarks on Waqf Act as motivated and baseless, asks it to look at its own abysmal record with regard to rights of minorities. A US judge on Tuesday said that there was no evidence that Trump administration had tried to secure the return of a man illegally deported to El Salvador. The judge, however, said she would not hold the government in contempt of court for now. US District Judge Paula Shinis said that the administration had not given her any information of value about what it had done in the matter so far.
Dozens of protesters carrying signs reading "Defend Democracy" gathered outside the courthouse in Maryland on Tuesday, where a judge slammed US government for its failure to return a migrant who was wrongly deported to El Salvador. They were joined by Kilmer Abrego Garcia's wife, Jennifer Vasquez Sura, who urged Trump and his ally, Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele, to stop playing political games.
That I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmer. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much.
US President Donald Trump's showdown with the judicial system came into spotlight as District Judge Paula Shinis demanded that US officials provide documents and answer questions under oath about what it had done to secure the return of Garcia. She earlier ordered Trump to facilitate his return, an order which was upheld by the US Supreme Court.
So the hearing really concerned whether or not the US government is complying with judicial orders that say to the US government, Mr. Abrego Garcia should be returned to the United States.
Meanwhile, US Border Czar Tom Homan has said that Trump administration will obey the court orders.
This administration will obey court orders, unlike the last administration. But if you ask me if I'm in favor of returning terrorists to the United States that are gang members, that have murdered and raped young women in this country, no, I'm not in favor of that at all.
Trump has previously alleged that Abrego Garcia is an MS-13 gang member and a foreign terrorist from El Salvador. Garcia's family continues to proclaim his innocence. Hoping to heap some political pressure on the president, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has said that he will travel to El Salvador on Wednesday to check on Abrego Garcia's condition and discuss his return. El Salvador's President Bukele on Monday met Donald Trump at the White House, where he rejected calls to repatriate Garcia, saying he did not have the power to return Garcia to the US. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now, lawyers have accused the Salvadoran government of denying access to over 200 Venezuelans deported by the US, and they have been unable to contact their clients, they claim, whose identities were obtained through leaks. Human Rights Watch stated that there is no official list of detained Venezuelans and families have not received any information about their whereabouts from Salvadoran or U.S. authorities. The group called on the Salvadoran government to confirm who is being held, disclose the legal grounds for their detention and grant them contact with the outside world. President Nayib Bukele's administration has not addressed these allegations. Under a March agreement, 238 Venezuelans were sent to El Salvador's terrorism confinement center during a U.S. immigration crackdown. Meanwhile, relatives of the deported migrants marched to the government palace in Caracas demanding updates about their loved ones. The U.S. is paying El Salvador $6 million to hold Venezuelan deportees and others accused of gang ties. However, the attorneys and relatives are denying these gang affiliations. Concerns are rising over the detainees' due process rights and the harsh conditions in the Sikot mega prison. Meanwhile, Trump has said that he plans to roll out a new program offering money for illegal immigrants in the country to leave voluntarily. Trump said such a self-deportation program would include some financial assistance and the prospect of re-entering the country later legally. Trump has vowed to deport record numbers of migrants in the U.S. illegally and has tested the bounds of U.S. law to increase arrests and deportations.
What we want to do is we're going to have a self-deportation program. What are we going to do? We're going to give them a stipend. We're going to give them some money and a plane ticket. And then we're going to work with them. If they're good, if we want them back in, we're going to work with them to get them back in as quickly as we can.
Further, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to strip Harvard of its tax-exempt status as the feud with the college escalated. This action comes after the president already moved to freeze $2.2 billion of federal funding to Harvard over its refusal to agree to demands which include how the university selects its students. DD India's Harshita Oberoi has more.
The Trump administration has issued a stark ultimatum. Harvard must fall in line or risk losing its protected tax status. Trump posted on social media that Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it does not submit to the demands for the university to change the way it runs itself, including selection of students and authority for professors.
First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students.
The government froze more than $2 billion in federal research contracts and grants after President Alan Garber vowed to protect constitutional rights, declaring the university will not be taken over. Harvard has enlisted law firms, including Queen Emanuel, to defend its autonomy. The pressure campaign echoes a similar clash with Columbia University. After protests on campus, the administration cut $400 million in funding. Dozens of universities are separately battling the Trump administration in court over broad research funding cuts that have led to staff layoffs. Meanwhile, 3 law students have filed a lawsuit against the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, challenging its investigation into diversity, equity, and inclusion policies at 20 major US law firms. They claim the agency is unlawfully collecting personal data, weaponizing it under political orders. Harshita Oberoi's report for DD India.
More news from the U.S. The White House has announced that wire services such as that of Reuters and Bloomberg will no longer have a permanent spot in the small group of reporters covering President Donald Trump. The move is a part of an effort to have more control over which journalists can directly question the president and report on his remarks in real time. This follows a legal defeat after wire service, the Associated Press, challenged its earlier exclusion, prompting a judge to order AP's access to certain events while its lawsuit proceeds. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that the administration will now decide who gets access to exclusive areas like the Air Force One and the Oval Office authority, previously held by the White House Correspondents Association. Under the new policy, wire services will join a larger rotation with around 30 other outlets. AP was barred for refusing to call a body of water the Gulf of America, as Donald Trump had earlier instructed. The tariff war between US and China seems to be hurting companies on both sides of the divide. With no one ready to blink first, the companies with global presence like that of Boeing and Nvidia are witnessing extreme headwinds. A report. The escalating tit-for-tat tariffs between the world's two biggest economies risk bringing goods trade between the two countries to a standstill. That trade was valued at over $650 billion in 2024. Trade and commerce on both sides of the divide are facing the heat due to escalating tensions. Chipmaker Nvidia on Tuesday said it would take $5.5 billion in charges after the US government limited exports of its H20 artificial intelligence chip to China. H20 is Nvidia's most advanced chip available for sale in China, which the company started designing after initial curbs were put on sale of advanced chips to China. H20 is central to Nvidia's efforts to stay engaged with China's booming AI industry. Another US major company, aviation giant Boeing, is facing severe headwinds. China has ordered its airlines not to take any further deliveries of Boeing jets in response to the US tariffs. China's top 3 airlines had planned to take delivery of Boeing planes between 2025 and 2027. Beijing has asked Chinese carriers to halt any purchases of aircraft-related equipment and parts from US companies. White House has said that US President Trump is open to talks, but China has to initiate the process now.
The president has made his position on China quite clear, although I do have an additional statement that he just shared with me in the Oval Office. The ball is in China's court. China needs to make a deal with us. We don't have to make a deal with them. There's no difference between China and any other country except they are much larger. And China wants what we have, what every country wants, what we have, the American consumer. Or to put it another way, they need our money. So the president, again, has made it quite clear that he's open to a deal with China, but China needs to make a deal with the United States of America.
On the other side, China has also acknowledged that tariff war is having a negative impact on its economy. Sheng Liun, Deputy Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics, said that US tariffs were putting pressure on the economy and trade. China also removed Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen from his role as trade negotiator and replaced him with a former Chinese representative to the World Trade Organization. Anamika Pandey's report for DD India. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Malaysia on Tuesday for a highly anticipated state visit that comes as Beijing fights an escalating trade war with the United States. Xi said that he expected to use his visit as an opportunity to further deepen the bilateral traditional friendship and strengthen political mutual trust. Xi embarked this week on a Southeast Asia tour that has already taken him to Vietnam and will also include Cambodia, with Beijing trying to position itself as a stable alternative to Trump's punitive tariff regime. China has remained Malaysia's largest trading partner for 16 consecutive years. Besides China, many countries are affected by Trump's tariff and thus are making efforts to visit the US and discuss trade issues. Among them is South Korea's Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok, who will meet his US counterpart Scott Bessent next week. Earlier on Tuesday, Choi said that his priority was to delay imposition of the reciprocal tariffs as much as possible and to minimize uncertainty for Korean companies operating not only in the US but also in global markets. The meeting comes as Trump seeks to levy tariffs next on semiconductors and chips. Further, South Korea announced on Tuesday an increase in its support package for the country's vital semiconductor industry to $23.25 billion, up about a quarter from $18.18 billion package unveiled last year. While South Korean Foreign Minister Choi Tae-yul met his Vietnamese counterpart Boi Tan Son on Tuesday, where they agreed to cooperate closely. Vietnam's foreign ministry said that the two countries are seeking to raise bilateral trade to $150 billion by 2030 in a more balanced and sustainable manner. Vietnam added that it is encouraging South Korean businesses to expand operations in Vietnam with a priority in infrastructure, electronics, semiconductors and renewable energy. Trump's reciprocal tariffs included a 46% duty on imports from Vietnam, a 25% duty on imports from South Korea. They have since been put on a 90-day moratorium until July. South Korean police raided on Wednesday the office of former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his security detail as part of a spiraling criminal probe into the impeached leader. Yoon declared martial law in December, sending armed soldiers to parliament before reversing course. He was quickly impeached by lawmakers but resisted arrest for weeks in a criminal probe. Police said on Wednesday they had initiated the execution of a search and seizure warrant at the presidential office and the presidential residence complex. Police seized encrypted phone servers and raided the office of Yoon's presidential security detail plus his chief of security's house. Police also seized CCTV footage from the presidential office as part of a separate probe into former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min. Yoon was in court on Monday for the first official day of his criminal trial on insurrection charges. Yoon denied that he committed insurrection. His next hearing is scheduled for April 21st, with experts saying that trial is likely to go on for months. US President Donald Trump ordered a probe into potential new tariffs on all US critical mineral imports on Tuesday, a major escalation in his dispute with global trade partners. Trump signed an order directing Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to start a national security probe under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. The order calls for a review of the market dynamics for all critical minerals, including cobalt, nickel, rare earths, uranium, and any other element deemed necessary by US officials to assess the need for potential tariffs. The same law was used by Trump in February to launch a probe into potential copper tariffs. Earlier this month, Beijing placed export restrictions on rare earths in response to Trump's recent broad tariffs. The United States has only one rare earths mine, and most of its processed supply comes from China. Next updates from Sudan. The paramilitary declared the establishment of government rivaling the army-backed administration 2 years into a conflict that has triggered the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The fighting has pitted the regular army led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan against the paramilitary rapid support forces headed by his former deputy Mohammad Hamadan Daglo. Daglo added on Tuesday that the paramilitaries, along with civil and political forces, had signed a transitional constitution, describing it as a roadmap for a new Sudan. That constitution provides for a 15-member presidential council representing all regions, symbolizing their voluntary unity. Meanwhile, G7 foreign ministers on Tuesday issued a statement calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Sudan and condemning attacks by Sudan's rapid support forces. The European Union and Britain pledged on Tuesday to increase aid for Sudan during a conference in London. Britain said that the conference aimed to improve the coherence of the international response to the crisis, although Sudan's government criticized the gathering because no representative from either side of the conflict was invited. A nearly 2,000-year-old mosaic of Medusa, one of the rarest examples of ancient marble craftsmanship, has been reopened to public in the ancient city of Kibera in Turkey. Located in the Golisar district of Burdur, the site is home to many significant artifacts, one of the most remarkable being the Medusa mosaic, crafted from colored marbles using the opus sectile technique. This Roman-era structure once functioned as a concert hall, courtroom and assembly venue located about 108 kilometers from the Burdur city center. The Medusa mosaic, which had been carefully covered during the winter months to protect it from the region's harsh weather, was unveiled once again with the arrival of spring. According to officials, visitors will have access to the mosaic until the end of November. Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. India renews strong call for UNSC reforms, urges concrete timelines and inclusive representation. And over 1 million people celebrate the water splashing Songkran festival in Bangkok.
This week on Defense Dynamic, India and the United States wrap up Exercise Tiger Trump 2025 on India's east coast. India successfully tests its long-range glide bomb Gaurav. Can this homegrown weapon redefine precision strike capability and send a strong message across the border? What are direct energy weapons? Why, after successful trial of DRDO's DEW, India is now in the exclusive club? And inside the Indian Air Forces, how the Wolf Pack strategy is transforming aerial warfare, coordination and lethal intent. Tune in this Wednesday at 8 p.m. IST only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Tanvi Taneja. India on Tuesday slammed Pakistan for its unfounded remarks on the Waqf Amendment Act enacted by the Parliament. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said on Tuesday that Islamabad has no standing on the issue and should look at its own abysmal record in protecting the rights of minorities. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs said, and I quote, "We strongly reject the motivated and baseless comments made by Pakistan on the Waqf Amendment Act enacted by the Parliament of India. Pakistan has no locus standi to comment on a matter that is internal to India. Pakistan would do better to look at its own abysmal record when it comes to protecting the rights of minorities instead of preaching to others." Unquote. Waqf Amendment Act was passed by Parliament on April 4th and got the President's assent a day later. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that under the new Waqf law, land or property belonging to tribals cannot be touched by the Waqf board. Poor Muslims and Pasmanda Muslims will get their rights. India has yet again strongly advocated for reforms of the UN Security Council, aiming for a more equitable and representative global body. In this regard, Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, P. Harish, delivered the statement of G4 at the Intergovernmental Negotiations on Security Council reforms, focused on size and regional representation. He stressed that geopolitical realities warrant a review of UN architecture, saying commencement of text-based negotiations and linking ambitious timelines with concrete outcomes are need of the hour.
First, those opposed to text-based negotiations do not seek progress on reforms. Second, an argument that an expanded and reformed Security Council would not be efficient is an attempt to stall real reforms. A reformed council with appropriate working methods and accountability mechanisms would be equipped to function effectively and deliver meaningfully on pressing global issues. Third, a consolidated model that does not cover expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories would not achieve the purpose of reform, further entrenching the status quo. And finally, attempts to introduce new parameters such as religion and faith as basis for representation in a reformed council runs completely counter to regional representation, which has been the accepted basis for representation in the United Nations.
On to sports news now. Five-time European champions Barcelona reached their first Champions League semi-final in 6 seasons with a 5-3 aggregate victory despite being beaten 3-1 by Borussia Dortmund on Tuesday. Serhou Jurese scored a hat-trick for Dortmund to condemn Barca to their first defeat across all competitions this year, but it could not prevent the Catalans from reaching the last four. Barcelona will play either Inter Milan or Bayern Munich, who face each other on Wednesday in the last four. And more than 1.13 million people celebrated the water splashing Songkran festival in Bangkok. The Songkran World Water Festival at Sanam Luang, held from April 11th alone, has generated an income of over 51 million US dollars.
Between Garuda and Nile.
สักช่วงหนึ่งก็แล้วกันครับ
So that's it in this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. And for those on the go, you can also download our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.